All right, today we're going to look at the Massachusetts Bay Colony, settled in 1630, and it's settled by Puritans, also known as Congregationalists. And let's talk a little bit about their beliefs so that we can better understand kind of just life in New England in general, and specifically Massachusetts. So they're called Congregationalists because they really believe that the local congregation, the local church, was the visible church, and was the really the highest authority within the church. So they didn't believe that there should be a hierarchy. In other words, a bishop or cardinals that could kind of tell the lower churches how to behave, what they're supposed to do, teach, and things like that. And so that the local congregation was the governing authority of the church. There shouldn't be anything above that. And so with it, the congregation kind of makes the rules to a certain extent what the church should be like. And each individual church was basically an independent church. They believed in the authority of the Bible, and only true Christians should be members of the church, and this would make up what they would sometimes refer to as the true church. And so to be a member of the church, though, was not a simple process necessarily. It wasn't simply say, yes, I believe in this, this, and this, although that would certainly be required. There would be much more than that. They would want to hear about your conversion experience and hear about testimony from you about how your life has changed as a result of your faith. And so it was very few people actually that were accepted as full members in a church. There might be many worshipers within the church, but not many members. And so these beliefs and other beliefs that disagreed with the Anglican Church or the Church of England led to Puritans being persecuted in England, especially when King James dies and King Charles I becomes king. He increases the amount of persecution that the Puritans are facing. And these Puritans in England were often called dissenters because they disagreed with or dissented from the Church of England. And so that left the Puritans with a dilemma. And that big dilemma they had was, should they separate from the Church of England or not? And the Pilgrims, these are the ones that settled Plymouth, say the differences between the Church of England are too great to remain a part of the Church of England to be a true church. And so to be truly a church of Christ, they had to separate from the Church of England because the Church of England's teachings were too much against what the Bible says for them to remain a part of that church. And others, like John Winthrop and other Puritans, disagreed with that. They wanted to stay within the Church of England. It gave them a little bit more freedom, but they also wanted to basically try to make corrections to the church and bring the church along, the Church of England along to their way of thinking as much as possible. But they end up following the lead of the Plymouth colony and actually are physically separated. So even though they don't necessarily call themselves separatists and that they think they should separate from the Church of England, they physically separate by moving to the New World, moving to Massachusetts Bay, and becoming a city upon a hill. It's part of a famous speech by John Winthrop. And this idea is that they're going there to be an example to people back in England on how to live as the church and as a society governed by these principles. And they believe they can show the true way. And that's a big deal, though, because that means, hey, if you're not going to be a part of this, if you're not going to be a Puritan, you're not going to follow our faith, our beliefs here, then don't come be a part of this experiment and this expedition that we're on. And so they end up settling in what is today Boston. You can see on the map, you can see Boston. Salem is an additional, another settlement, one of the early settlements. And you can see kind of the Massachusetts Bay Colony divided from the, so here's the kind of the dividing line between the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the Plymouth Colony. And Boston being right here, right there, and Salem being north of that. And so those are two major settlements. And fishing, lumber, shipbuilding, and trade quickly become major industries. Boston is a better port than what Plymouth is. So Boston was a better location in general. It becomes grows very quickly. And there's a lot in the course of from 1630 basically to 1640. The numbers disagree, but a minimum of 10,000, probably closer to 20,000 people are moving to these colonies, and so they're spreading out from around Boston. And as this rapid growth happens, we see a great variety of jobs needed, all sorts of positions. Now, you don't need; it's not going to become the major industries, but people can get, do all sorts of different types of work because there's so many people that are moving there in this time period and living there now. And so you can see here that there's a lot of different industries, but one of the ones that is almost everybody participates in, but it's not a major economic activity, is farming. There's lots of people that are doing farming, but it's on a fairly small scale because the soil and the climate is not really set for good farming conditions, and so it's what is often called subsistence farming, and maybe just a little better than subsistence, but it's not large plantations, not major exports usually. And so that's a little bit about the settlements and the economy. And then finally, the Native Americans. So the region had been decimated by disease prior to the arrival of the Puritans and the Plymouth colonists, but that didn't mean there was no Native Americans there. There certainly were, and you can see the names of several of these different groups that were in and around Massachusetts. One of them is the Pequot group, and they were actually a lot in this area. And they're trying to. There's some problems. They've been pushed around by other groups, and so they're feeling the pressure, especially once the English arrive. And there is some alliances between the Pequot and the Dutch and the English and some of these other tribes like the Wampanoag. And so there's a war that breaks out, and the Pequot really lose their territory during this time, and they're decimated. Much later, the 1670s, King Philip's War happens, and King Philip is actually the son of Massasoit, who is the chief that kind of invited and allowed the Plymouth colony to stay there. There was a long period of peace, but as the colonists have continued to move there, that peace disintegrates, and fighting is very severe. Lots of people on both sides killed, but in New England, after King Philip's War, the Native Americans are severely limited in their ability to protect their lands and defend their lands. So that's a quick overview of the Massachusetts Bay Colony.